I feel like when people talk about their favorite seasons, spring doesn't come up a lot. I never understood why, because spring was always my favorite. The smell of flowers in the air is always just beautiful. I also come from an area where it snows horribly in the winter, and it seems like winter's never going to end. So for me, spring was almost like a homecoming of sorts. However, the events of last year left such a bad taste in my mouth, I'll unfortunately never look at spring the same way again. Right around late March, when the snow starts to melt, I usually try to walk as much as possible. I walked a little more last year than usual because my car needed to be fixed, and being a single woman, I only have one car. I honestly didn't mind walking though. My job wasn't far from where I lived. I bartended at a local bar that was maybe a mile away from the apartment complex where I was staying at the time. The apartments were nothing special, but they were located in a really nice suburban area. It was one of these picture-perfect little neighborhoods that you'd see in a movie or something, and they're tucked right in the middle of what was my little apartment sanctuary. For the first couple of days, everything was great. The weather had broken a few days prior, and I was soaking up the afternoon sun on the way to work and breathing in the nice crisp spring air at night on the way home. I was never worried about walking alone because, like I said, the area was nice and I never saw any kind of crime or shady characters or even any cop cars for that matter. On the third day with no car, things changed quite a bit. It was pouring outside. Like one of those days where the rain is coming down so hard it looks like it's turning sideways. Now pardon the pun, but you know when they say when it rains it pours? And that was about to become even more true in this situation. Not wanting to walk into the downpour, I tried to get a ride to work, but of course, nobody was around to give me a ride. Then I tried to Uber to work, but of course, my phone wasn't working and I didn't have time to get to the phone store to fix it. You see what I mean about that expression now. Unfortunately, in the pouring rain, I had to walk to work, and never in my life has a mile seemed so long. I moved briskly to the bar, trying not to think about how soaked I was about to be when I arrived at work. On the walk to the bar, I do have to cross one busy intersection. When I approached the intersection, I noticed someone was behind me. It even seemed that it was a hooded figure with their hands in the front pocket. It made sense since it was raining and you wanted to cover your head. Now, they weren't close, but they probably were several yards away. I didn't really pay too much attention since I was annoyed about the rain and it was still daylight out at this point, so it's not unlikely that someone would also be walking in the rain with a hood. I crossed the intersection and ran the rest of the way. When I got to the door of the bar, I noticed that the person behind me was running across the street now, and once they got to the side of the street the bar was on, they started to walk again and stopped at the end of the parking lot of the bar. Again, I didn't really care because honestly, that's not that weird. My manager at the bar gave me a new company shirt and luckily one of the waitresses had an extra pair of jeans in her car, so I was able to get some dry clothes. That would have been a scary story on its own if I had to work soaking wet like that all night. Several hours into the shift, I noticed someone sitting at the end of the bar. It was a strange-looking man, most likely in his 50s. Since the bar is big, there are usually two of us serving drinks. The man was sitting on the other side, which the other bartender would have been serving. Now, something about this guy just didn't feel right. I don't get creeped out very much, but this guy was giving me all sorts of bad feelings. He had a beer in front of him that was half drank. He was just staring into the distance. His expression just seemed completely blank. It's not unlikely to see people with that wandering gaze in bars, especially if they had a little too much to drink, but this guy's expression just felt different. He was completely still and not even blinking. And that's when I noticed that he had that same dark hood on, and I started to wonder if it was the same guy that I saw earlier. I realized having a dark hood doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, there are probably a dozen people in the bar with dark hooded sweatshirts on, but I still couldn't help but wonder if it was the same guy behind me when I was walking to work. About 15 minutes till 2 a.m., the man finally paid his tab and left. I was starting to wonder if this guy was ever going to leave. As soon as he left, we locked the doors 10 minutes early and did all of our cleanings so we could get out at a reasonable time. Well, my night just kept getting better. It was still raining out and I had to walk home. The only person with me was one of my coworkers, a guy named Dan, who I was not a big fan of. Dan liked me a lot and wanted to be more than just friends, but unfortunately I just didn't feel for Dan the same way. We had gone on a few dates, but it really didn't go anywhere, and Dan didn't take it very well. So my options at this point were to ask Dan to drive me home or walk home alone in the rain. And I chose the rain. I was basically jogging in the rain, just trying to get home at this point. I planned on taking a hot shower as soon as I got home, so I didn't care too much about the rain this time around. About halfway to the apartment complex, I thought I heard something. When I turned around, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a figure standing about 20 feet away. The figure had a dark hood that was concealing their face and their hands in their front pocket. I turned back around and started to jog a bit faster, as it was very disconcerting to me. When I looked behind me, the figure was now in a full sprint after me. My heart began to beat out of my chest. I started to run as fast as I could, and I was screaming uncontrollably, but it was raining so hard that I don't think anybody could hear me. The figure was so close now that I could even hear the footsteps splashing behind me. My apartment was probably still several blocks away, and I was fearing the worst. And then the most unthinkable thing happened. Car lights could be seen reflecting off the rain-drenched street. I was flailing my arms trying to alert the motorist, who thankfully did stop, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Dan on his way home. He got out of his car, seeing that the man was chasing after me, and he tried to tackle the hooded figure. He missed him, but the hood came off the guy's face and revealed that it was that same guy who had been sitting at the bar all night. The man ran full speed into the night and was gone within seconds. Dan gave me a ride home and made sure that I got inside safely. He stayed with me for a little while, and we called the police just to alert them what had happened, and maybe they could find the guy walking in the street or something. Once my heart finally stopped beating in my chest, and once I finally calmed down, I asked Dan why he was following me, because now I started to feel creeped out by him, and I just had anxiety about everything. But what he told me was infinitely creepier. He said when he was pulling out of the bar parking lot, he noticed someone running out from behind the bar, almost seemingly like they were trying to keep up with me. Immediately, he started to follow us instead of driving home, which is in the opposite direction of his, and once it became obvious what was clearly happening, he acted right away and tried to apprehend the man. After speaking with the cops several times and giving a description, I don't believe the guy was ever actually caught. I thanked Dan repeatedly, and we became actual friends after that night. That was the last day I ever walked to work or walked really anywhere alone. Now, spring may be beautiful, but I'll never enjoy spring showers the same ever again. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.